Imagine two neighbors divided only by a stormy sea, both striking black gold at almost the same moment in history. One is a modest fishing nation of 4 million souls. The other, the former workshop of the world, cradle of the Industrial Revolution. By 2025, the modest fisherman will be the richest person on the planet per capita, sitting on a $1.7 trillion sovereign wealth fund larger than the entire economy of the United Kingdom. The once mighty empire, it has no funds at all. Its oil bonanza came and went like a fever dream, leaving behind higher inequality, crumbling infrastructure, and a national debt it still can't shake. This is the story of Norway and Britain. Same sea, same decade, same miracle resource, diametrically opposite outcomes. One nation treated North Sea oil as a sacred intergenerational trust. The other treated it as a lucky windfall to finance tax cuts for the rich and a housing bubble. The difference isn't luck or geography. It's politics, philosophy, and the simple question every society must answer when fortune knocks. Do we spend the inheritance, or do we grow it for our grandchildren? What follows is the tale of two oil states, one that escaped the curse, and one that walked straight into it. Story. In December 1969, the drillship Ocean Viking struck oil at the Ekofisk field in the Norwegian sector of the North Sea. 2 years later, Phillips Petroleum made the official announcement. Norway, a country whose GDP was then smaller than that of Portugal, had just won the geological lottery. Across the water, Britain had already been producing oil from the Forties field since 1975. For a brief, dizzying moment in the late 1970s and early 1980s, the United Kingdom was the world's fifth largest oil producer. Prime Minister James Callaghan called North Sea oil God's gift to rescue a sick economy battered by inflation, strikes, and the humiliation of an IMF bailout in 1976. God's gift turned out to be a test. The Norwegian choice. This wealth belongs to all generations. From day one, Norway asked a question Britain never seriously entertained. Who does this oil really belong to? In 1972, the Norwegian parliament passed the 10 Oil Commandments, a quasi-constitutional framework. Key principles were breathtakingly simple. National control over resources. Oil revenue must develop a qualitatively better society. Extraction must be slow and prudent to avoid overheating the economy. A state-owned company, later Statoil, now Equinor, would retain major stakes. A large share of profits would be saved for future generations. When the Sovereign Wealth Fund, officially the Government Pension Fund Global, was created in 1990, the rule was ironclad. The capital itself could never be touched. Only a portion of the expected real return, today around 3%, can be spent annually. Politicians who raid the fund for short-term votes face electoral oblivion. The fund's independence is guarded like a national religion. The result? As of November 2025, the fund stands at roughly $1.74 trillion, over $320,000 for every Norwegian citizen. It owns on average 1.4% of every listed company in the world, making tiny Norway the planet's largest single equity investor. It owns more of London's Regent Street than the British state owns of anything comparable. The British choice. There is no such thing as public money. There is only taxpayers' money. In 1979, Margaret Thatcher swept to power promising to roll back the state. North Sea oil arrived at the perfect ideological moment. Between 1979 and 1997, the Conservatives privatized virtually everything that moved. British Petroleum, already partially private, Britoil, Enterprise Oil, and dozens of fields. The Treasury received one-off checks, about £67 billion in total privatization proceeds and rather modest tax revenues, but surrendered forever the dividends and higher tax take a Norwegian-style model would have delivered. A 1980 Cabinet Office paper warned that selling Britoil would bring £1 billion short-term but cost very high sums in the long term. The warning was ignored. By the time Labour returned in 1997, the fields were in private hands and the chance to build a fund had vanished. Tax policy told the same story. Britain's effective take per barrel averaged around $1 to $5 in real terms for decades. Norway's was closer to $30 to $50 once dividends and taxes are combined. A 2014 study by the Natural Resource Governance Institute calculated that, had Britain mirrored Norway's fiscal regime and state ownership, it would have collected an extra $400 to $850 billion, £300 to £650 billion, since 1970, roughly £5,000 to £10,000 per British citizen lost forever. The British choice: there is no such thing as public money, there is only taxpayers' money. In 1979, Margaret Thatcher swept to power promising to roll back the state. North Sea oil arrived at the perfect ideological moment. Between 1979 and 1997, the Conservatives privatized virtually everything that moved. British Petroleum, already partially private, Britoil, Enterprise Oil, and dozens of fields. The Treasury received one-off checks, about £67 billion in total privatization proceeds and rather modest tax revenues, but surrendered forever the dividends and higher tax take a Norwegian-style model would have delivered. A 1980 Cabinet Office paper warned that selling Britoil would bring £1 billion short-term but cost very high sums in the long term. The warning was ignored. By the time Labour returned in 1997, the fields were in private hands and the chance to build a fund had vanished. Tax policy told the same story. Britain's effective take per barrel averaged around $1 to $5 in real terms for decades. Norway's was closer to $30 to $50 once dividends and taxes are combined. A 2014 study by the Natural Resource Governance Institute calculated that, had Britain mirrored Norway's fiscal regime and state ownership, it would have collected an extra $400 to $850 billion, £300 to £650 billion, since 1970, roughly £5,000 to £10,000 per British citizen lost forever. Where did the money go? Mostly to tax cuts weighted toward high earners. Top-rate income tax fell from 83% on earned income to 40%. Corporation tax dropped from 52% to 33% and eventually 19%. The windfall helped finance the 1980s city boom and a housing price explosion that has saddled younger generations with unaffordable homes ever since. Public investment was slashed. Net public sector investment fell from 4% of GDP in the late 1970s to under 1% by the mid-1990s. Railways, water, power grids, and council housing were sold off rather than modernized. The proceeds disappeared into current spending or tax cuts, never into a ring-fenced future fund. The Dutch disease that wasn't Dutch. Economists speak of Dutch disease when resource wealth pushes up the currency, killing manufacturing. Britain caught it badly. Between 1979 and 1981, oil pushed sterling to $2.40. Exporters were crucified. Manufacturing employment collapsed by nearly 30% in 4 years. The northeast of England and central Scotland still bear the scars. Norway deliberately avoided the disease. It produced slowly when prices were low, built up the fund abroad, preventing krone appreciation, and used fiscal rules to smooth spending. This manufacturing sector survived. Britain largely didn't. Life after oil. Today Norway is sprinting toward a post-oil future. It has the world's highest electric vehicle penetration, over 90% of new cars, vast hydropower, and a fund that will comfortably finance pensions and green investment for decades. Unemployment is 3.5%, labor participation among the highest in the OECD, and inequality among the lowest. Britain decommissioned its last oil platform in the 2020s with no sovereign wealth buffer. It faces the same energy transition but with higher debt, lower savings, and a political culture that still treats windfall thinking as alien. The Rosebank and Jackdaw fields, controversial new developments approved in 2023, will generate perhaps 20 to 30 billion pounds in tax over their lifetime, a fraction of what Norway will earn from mature fields this decade alone. Why the paths diverged? The difference boils down to three things: trust and time horizon. Norwegians trusted their institutions to manage money for the long term. British politics has been dominated by short-term electoral cycles and an ideological aversion to state ownership. Inequality tolerance. Norway's social democratic consensus insisted oil wealth be shared. Britain's 1980s chose to let it concentrate. State capacity. Norway built competent, partially state-owned companies and a world-class fund manager, Norges Bank Investment Management. Britain sold the family silver. Neither country is perfect. Oslo house prices are insane, Norwegian disability spending is generous to the point of concern, and the fund's sheer size gives it awkward global influence. Britain, meanwhile, has a more dynamic tech and finance sector in absolute terms. But when historians write the economic story of the North Sea, they will record one of the clearest natural experiments in political economy. Two similar democracies, same resource, same timing, radically different choices, radically different destinies. Norway asked, "How do we make sure our great-grandchildren are richer because of this oil?" Britain asked, "How fast can we spend it?" The sea between them is only 300 miles wide. The philosophical gulf turned out to be immeasurable.